that PORA is taking its regulatory mission quite seriously in that regard as well. And we want to talk about this legislation. And first I'll introduce our great Majority Leader, Senator Bob Duff, who is himself a former chair of the Energy Committee prior to becoming Majority Leader. And then we'll hear from Senator Needleman, our chair. Senator Duff.
Thank you, Senator Looney, and good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here today. We are putting forward legislation this year, thanks to Senator Looney's leadership in prioritizing an energy bill, which is something that needs to happen. So I want to thank him for all his work. And this is really a continuation of what was done under Senator Needleman's leadership back in 2020 when we did our Take Back Our Grid legislation. Let me start that again. This is a continuation back from 2020 when we did our Take Back Our Grid legislation that has literally saved consumers millions of dollars already through the work that we did based on our law, based on what was done at the regulatory level. And we know, and we said at the time that we needed to do more, and we were going to continue to do more to bring relief to ratepayers. So we have worked to hold utilities accountable, and we have worked to strengthen our electric grid. And again, this has resulted in savings of millions of dollars for ratepayer. And the Ratepayers First Act will continue to do that. But we know that there are some things that we can do and we will do. We always tell consumers, and we talk about the fact that the cheapest energy is the energy that we don't use, which is why it's really important that we continue to work on our conservation methods, on working on clean energy, and other ways in which we can save consumers lots of money. We also know that we have to have a diversification of our generation, such as we have our nuclear, solar, and hydro as well. There's not one way in which we generate electricity here in the state of Connecticut, but there are multiple ways, and we need to make sure we're looking at a broad way to make sure that we have a diverse energy, not only here in Connecticut, but through our ISO New England as well. And we have to be looking at a regional basis when we're talking from a regulatory approach as well. A couple of years ago, Senator Looney and I, along with Senator Needleman, sent a letter to the regulatory bodies asking them in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire to come together finally for meetings publicly about electric prices. And they did. And I think that has actually started a new partnership that had not been there in the past. And while that's happening, we're seeing also our agencies work on a regional basis as well, which is why they won some grants from the Inflation Reduction Act, why we may see more money coming from with Hydro-Quebec as well. And why, when we look at legislation that's been done with Senator Needleman, why Millstone needs to be, if we acquire any more power from them, that needs to be done on a regional basis, not just on a basis from Connecticut, because of the fact that we can't go it alone. I think many times, and I'd love to hear Senator Needleman expand on this, but we have gone it alone too many times at high cost for our ratepayers. By doing more on a regional basis, I think that helps to level set and helps to make sure that we are taking on the risk that we need to, but not more risk than we have to, and that we are doing it on a basis that spreads costs throughout New England, again, because we work through the ISO New England grid. So thank you to Senator Looney for his leadership. Thank you to Senator Needleman, who can navigate these really, really difficult issues so well and balance it all based on what is the need and what is being demanded by our residents, and can do it with a cool, calm, collected way, and can get the best result for the folks that we represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Now we will hear from our Energy Chair, Senator Norm Needleman, who has chaired the committee since he first came to the Senate in 2019. his expertise crosses a lot of different areas with his prior experience before coming to the Senate, as well as what he's done since then. As the owner of a successful business, he's dealt with utility issues from the point of view of a businessman. He has also been for a long time first selectman of the town of Essex, and understands the issues of pressures on a municipal budget regarding utility costs, and then of course the statewide view that he has taken since becoming a state senator and chair of the committee. So we all know this is a challenging issue, and we are all grateful to have Senator Needleman's leadership on it. Senator Needleman.
Thank you, Senator Looney and Senator Duff. I appreciate the support of the caucus and the leadership of the caucus in trying to move forward another major initiative with regard to energy policy in the state of Connecticut. We did take back our grid, and that was in response to what we thought was inadequate performance after Hurricane Isaias, and then we did Senate Bill 7 2 years ago that built on that work. We want to strengthen the regulator and give them more options in terms of holding utilities accountable. And I want to sort of step back and say that a few things have happened in the state over a long period of time. The first, which I sort of feel at this moment in time is one of our original sins, is deregulation. It created a whole different marketplace. I think it was sold to the state as a panacea and something that was going to make it better and cheaper and more available. I think my good colleague Senator Looney was here, and he may have been one of the dissenting voices at that point, because I don't think it's panned out to be quite as good as everybody thought. What we have allowed to happen is individual public utilities which were regulated in one state are now multi-state, and there is no regional regulatory authority to hold the utilities accountable. Their corporate profits continue to grow, even in the face of some bad business decisions that they made where they've had to take write-offs. I don't criticize businesses for their business decisions, but I look at my job here and the job of the leadership of our committee to be fix what you can fix. Some parts of energy policy are very difficult. When we deregulated, we became part of a regional grid operator, and a lot of the decisions around supply of energy were taken out of our hands. They were really based on what the regional grid operator does. And I don't want to get into the inane aspects of energy policy. When Senator Looney asked me, what I was interested in when I first got elected, I had certainly had my share of experiences with Eversource, CLMP before that as first selectman and as a selectman. My goal was really to help make them a better company, more responsive to municipal CEOs and the customers that they serve. And he said, why don't you chair energy? That'll be easy. You'll enjoy that. Well, it's been an interesting ride, I will say that. And certainly the aspects of accountability and making sure that the performance that the utility provides in exchange for an exclusive monopoly to provide us not only distribution but transmission of electricity, that is something that is very complicated. And as I said, there's been no desire to hurt these companies, but if we have to bring them a little bit around to understanding that the way it was for the prior 20 years is not the way it's going to be, I think we found a willing partnership with our regulators, and it's been pretty much war ever since then. I'm not excited about that, but I'm here to fight the battle for the ratepayers. That's why this bill is being titled Ratepayers First. We want to make sure that we provide the most reliable, best price energy to the state of Connecticut. We do have environmental goals. We want to make sure the air quality is good. We want to make sure that when power plants are located, they're not impacting people in a negative way. We know we have high rates of asthma and other respiratory problems in city areas where many power plants have been located. So we're looking to make sure that those environmental goals, the critical ones, are dealt with. And of course, we're all concerned. I am a Democrat. I am deeply, deeply concerned about climate change. I have been the more skeptical person about what you can do one state at a time, because I think we need national leadership. And with leadership changing in Washington, I think a lot of our discussions are going to go by the wayside next week. But we still have to do our part. So a lot of how we built our energy rates is based on this deregulated model, and we're trying to fix it in any way we can, control what we can control, which are the parts that are not deregulated, and we expect from our partners in the utilities a response that is reasonable and not aggressive, that the amount of lobbying, the amount of money spent to influence everybody involved in this process is astounding to me. So I think that I have a great partner in my co-chair, Representative Steinberg. We have a great leadership team. This year, this bill is an open book. There are no specific things that we're going to talk about at this moment. We're going to listen to all the bills that are coming in, and they're coming in at a rate much higher and faster than the Energy Committee has ever seen. Many of them are duplicative, but we're going to listen to ideas from across the spectrum. That's Republicans and Democrats, that's cities and rural areas, that's everybody that we can hear from, and then decide what belongs in this bill. So with that, I want to say thank you.
So there's no questions.
No questions. No questions.
No questions?
No, I'm only kidding.
So Senator Needleman, so you and I talked last week about Senator Fazio's plan, his idea of taking some of the stuff off the public benefits charge, putting it into, and he says, the budgetary process. You kind of refer to that as a gimmick. You said it's not a real idea. I'm looking at point 1 here, and it says shift electric vehicle charging programs off of the ratepayer bills, and you're saying put it on a credit card, put it into the bonding process. Is this a gimmick or is this a real solution? Because you said one thing last week, and it seems like you're saying a different thing.
So I want to be clear about that. Last week I said there were a couple of things that we might want to look at that are more bonding, but anything related to electric rates and usage directly should be done through your bill, as they have been for 30, 40, 50 years. This is not new. You know, the EV program is the one that sort of comes to mind. Maybe we can move that into bonding. That's a discussion with the governor, because it doesn't specifically impact rates. It's a small amount of money over a longer period of time in the bill. There are reasons why it was done the way it was done, because one of the things that we're concerned about is the impact of electrification on our electric grid. And by putting the authority under PURA to do that, they are creating criteria for building out a charging infrastructure that has the minimal impact on the need for upgrading the grid, especially when it comes to residential chargers. That said, I would like to see a more equitable program that, you know, helps people that are lower income, where we think that there's going to be a gap for them to buy electric vehicles when the time is right. I think that hybrids are sort of more the way of the future in the short term, but that may be the one thing that the rest of it, I think, is not anything. I mean, I'm going to listen, obviously, but I don't think that they're real ideas. As I said to you, Mike, they were bad ideas last year. They were bad ideas during the campaign. They're generally still bad ideas right now.
Senator, on a broader issue, right, so energy is a very complex undertaking. You want to reduce costs, you want to increase supply. We heard last week from the energy utility companies themselves saying we have antiquated transmission lines, all of that. This will be a long-term process. In the short term, as ratepayers look to their bills, what can people expect to come out of this session?
Well, I think certain things are going to happen irrespective of what we do in this session. The big thing that jammed up the bill last time, which I want to back up and say the way we do the bill now is a recent innovation. It used to be 2 categories, and in the interest of transparency, PURA worked on a docket to make the bill clearer. So now you have 4 buckets instead of 2. Everything related to all of our policies, many of which have nothing to do with social programs. They have to do with decoupling, with rate adjustment mechanisms, used to be in the distribution side of the bill. I think that in some ways we did the utilities and because of circumstances sort of beyond our control, we did the Republicans a favor by breaking this down at this moment, and you see this public policy piece that had traditionally been in aggregate 10 to 12% of the bill, looking like it's 30% of the bill right now. Most of that had to do with the Millstone hedge. The Millstone hedge, because Pura voted 2-1 to do that over a short amount of time, 10 months, from July 1st until May 1st, you're seeing a big blow up in that particular cost. I think come May 1st, a lot of that's going to fall off on its own. Hopefully come July 1st, we see some relief on the summer rate side. So I'm hoping that doing nothing is actually going to solve some problems on its own, but not enough.
But transparency, is that enough to make ratepayers more confident that their bills are not going to go up and that they will have consistent, reliable service as we move to a long-term goal?
So if you ask me on any given moment, how do I feel about transparency? I feel that more transparency is a good thing. It doesn't mean that every time you're transparent, it works out the way you want it to work out, and circumstances beyond our control coincided with this bill transparency, and it ended up creating, one, a political opportunity, and two, something that was able to be fueled anger. The number of calls that I and my colleagues have gotten about that public benefits, it shouldn't be there, it's paying for people who didn't pay their bills, that why am I paying for their electric? I find that that is a small part, and the fact that people feel that way has been a messaging problem, and I think that the message came out that this is all helping people. This is social policies. There are some, but things like energy efficiency and decoupling and how we handle procurements are also in that category. And one of the things that we can consider is the possibility of even further complicating your bill into more buckets.
So this proposal, I just want to go back to this about taking the electric vehicle subsidies off the bill. It's kind of the only immediate proposal that's floated in here. Do you have any estimate of how much money that might save the average ratepayer if it was done?
You mean the car charging?
Yes, the EV.
I think very little. I think it's maybe $1 a month, but I don't have the facts right in front of me, but it's not a lot, and we can get back to you on that, Mike.
So help me out on this. So I'm seeing a lot of words in here. Potential may include, folks are going to see the headline and say, oh, Democrats announced Ratepayers First Act. You said this isn't actually a piece of legislation that someone can go read. This is sort of a concept.
Correct.
A concept of a plan or something like that.
I think that our caucus has done a magnificent job in putting out general, broad ideas that we want to hear from the public, from our colleagues, from the advocates about what should go into them. And I think that that has generally worked over the last years that I've been in the legislature. So this is a bill that I asked for to be a caucus priority bill. And yes, there's a lot of ideas on the table, nothing that's locked down yet.
A lot of public hearings to come?
Several.
Several.
I would imagine that they might be long.
So how can you prioritize something without knowing what's inside it? Like, obviously, we know that the issue is a priority for you.
And that's why, Mike. The issue is the priority at this point.
What's the role of the legislature in any expansion of nuclear power norm without getting too far into the weeds?
Sure. So a few years ago, there had been for 40 years a moratorium on expansion of nuclear in the state of Connecticut. We passed the bill, I think it was almost unanimous in both chambers, to allow for expansion of new nuclear on an existing nuclear site. I think that we're going to visit that and possibly allow for expansion of nuclear beyond just the existing nuclear site of Millstone, but kind of restricted to small modular reactors, because I think that's the way of the future. I don't see any developers building 1,000-megawatt nuclear reactors anymore.
Governor Lamont supports that. Do you expect any pushback about expanding the current facility?
I do not. I think that there's generally broad bipartisan support for new nuclear. It's not an immediate fix, it's not a panacea, but it is a carbon-free resource, and as long as the new nuclear is safe, I think that you'll see that happening here. Legislature's job is to really set the table so that it can happen, and the ban had been in effect for so long that it took a lot of explaining to remove it, because it was not something that people would have voted for 10 years ago.
Governor Lamont also supports, I think, the appointment of Marissa Gillette to be as chairman, I believe. Is that something I know that Republicans don't want to see happen? They don't feel that it's not as Eversource. How do you feel about that?
Excuse me? He sent the letter supporting her. I've supported her efforts. I support the efforts of PURA. I don't expect unanimity on the PURA authority, but I support two things. One is I support the governor's new appointment, Representative Arconti, who was my co-chair for 4 years. I support the work that Marissa Gillette has done, and I do not support going to 5 members of that authority to dilute her efforts.
Norm, can you talk about what expectation should be as far as, what's real? You, Senator Fazio, Governor Lamont have all talked about the limited options for, and you just mentioned small modular reactors. None have been built. I guess the NRC has approved a design, but what's realistic about how soon before that new technology could be achieved here or anywhere in the U.S., and so far it's just on paper?
As we've seen with all power generation, even if you wanted to build a new natural gas plant or a new dual fuel gas oil plant, it could take 3 to 5 years. So when you talk about a new technology like small modular reactors, there's a lot of work going on all over the world on this at this point. And I think that we're probably looking in the 2030s for when they're going to really begin to matter. In the short run, after talking to ISO New England, I'm not sure that New England at the moment has a supply problem, right? I'm not sure that there's a shortage of electrons being put out over the grid. I think that part of our problem in New England is that we're at the end of a pipeline. We're very much restricted. It's not only us, it's the other states that also have high rates. And when people say we're the highest or we're the second highest, you look at New England, New York, we're kind of all in a group bundled together. New York may be a little different because they're not part of a regional grid. But what has really made a difference for New England is that being part of a regional grid, anything that are part of our own initiatives, anything that we want to do, we're going to end up either paying for twice or hedging, like we did with Millstone. We have Dominion's, we have one of the largest nuclear assets in the Northeast. We have the largest in the Northeast, one of the largest in the country. And Dominion said at the wholesale price of energy, they were not able to make a go of it. Before I was here in 2017, this legislature voted to allow for a procurement to be done, to buy power from them at a fixed price. It's a hedge. People who understand how hedging works, sometimes you're in the money on the hedge, sometimes you're not. And I think that last year we passed a bill that would allow for that to go on for another 10 years, but required that 2 other states participate.
Dominion CEO was in the building the day after the governor's state of the state. Did you or any of the other 2 senators meet with him?
Yes.
And did he talk about capacity, or was the conversation mainly about looking ahead to 2029 when the Millstone deal expires?
Really not like to go into the private conversation that I had with the CEO of Dominion, but let it suffice to say that they are also a shareholder-based company, and this is one of their unregulated assets. They're responsible, as most utilities are, to their shareholders. And because energy generation is unregulated, there's only so much we can do about holding them accountable. That's why the focus has to be on the regulated public utilities from an accountability point of view. But I do believe that there's a sincere effort on the part of Dominion and the governor to try to come to some kind of terms to extend that. But that's really a question you'd have to ask him.
So are you talking about legislative authorization for the regulated utilities to get back into the nuclear power business?
No. Interesting concept, though. Maybe we'll add that in there, Mark.
Senator, so as I understand it, Dominion is looking for help cleaning up the decommissioned reactor. Has that been discussed? Is there any horse trading going on in terms of getting access to their site to add modular small nuclear?
So in some of the discussions a couple of years ago, before the currently retired person who ran it, the discussions around small modulars, what he said was that, well, we have to clean up reactor 1. That said, there's, it's got to remember the role of the legislature. It's not for me to negotiate with Dominion about, we set the table. I like thinking of it that we set the table. We've allowed for the expansion there. If they can come to terms with a price that makes sense for us and the other states, they'll do it. And the other part of it is obviously the data center issue, which I think when we passed the data center bill, we probably made a mistake by granting a subsidy for behind-the-meter data centers. I think we should not do that, not only because of the nuclear issue and Millstone, but also because of crypto mining, which tends to sign contracts behind the meter for old fossil fuel dirty plants that they breathe new life into them. And I think those are the plants that we want to be very careful about not having run more often.
How long do you think it would take to do some of the long-term transmission investments that we heard last week that Connecticut needs?
So one of the things that's important to also know is what we control, what we don't control. We don't regulate transmission, right? That is regulated and sort of rubber stamped, generally speaking, at FERC. FERC does not do rate cases on transmission, and the only part of the process that states are involved with is the possibility of testifying as an intervener in a process at FERC. But it's very hard to get information from the utilities about cost, and we want to make sure, if it's possible, to add legislation in there that provides some transparency to us about avoiding things that have been referred to, not by the utilities, of course, but by other people, gold plating transmission lines, where they get a much higher rate of return guaranteed through FERC. There are no rate cases involved, to my knowledge. So we're looking at the possibility of making sure that we get more information. So if the state of Connecticut, if DEEP, if the Attorney General, if anybody wants to contest any of what they're putting out there, that we have at least some information that allows us to do that.
Thanks, everybody.
Do you want to chime in, Senator? Can I ask you a very simple question?